So for today's video, it's time to continue my monthly tradition where I rank every Blu-ray that I watched for the first time over the previous month. This time it was May 2023. Let's do this thing. How's it going, my friends? Welcome again to Cobwebs. My name is Daniel, and this is the YouTube channel where we dust off old movies. Retro, classic kind of stuff. We talk about Blu-rays, we do reviews, rankings. We have a lot of fun. And the first thing you might notice about this video is my background looks a little bit different. That's actually because I am painting my basement, the movie basement, the crypt of Castle Cobwebs. I never painted it since we moved into this house, and I feel like I never truly made it my own. So that's what I'm doing right now. This is what my filming location currently looks like right now. Not so good for a video. So I'm actually in my wife's office. Very thankful to have this space. Very thankful to have this background. Looks like there's some crazy, trippy stuff going on around my head. I'm kind of digging it, but I'm still anxious to get back downstairs to the basement, and we'll be back there very soon. For this month's stack, I've got 13 Blu-rays. 13 Blu-rays that I popped into my Blu-ray player and watched for the first time over the previous month. It has to be Blu-rays that I watched for the first time, not necessarily movies that I saw for the first time. And I'm really excited about this stack. We have got genres spanning horror, western, romantic drama, noir, comedy, science fiction, so much stuff. We've got Blu-ray labels like Criterion, Scream Factory, Vestron, Kino Lorber, Mill Creek, Severin, Vinegar Syndrome, and we've got at least one movie from every decade from the 1930s all the way through the 1990s. So it's a really diverse stack. I'm super excited to talk about these movies. Without any further ado, let's boogie. In this ranking, I am going to include every movie in SEVERIN'S recent DANZA MACABRA Italian Gothic Blu-ray collection. That's because I got this and watched every movie over the last month. I'm not going to spend much time on them because I actually did a dedicated review to this set and every movie in it. So if you want more thoughts on this and you missed that previous video, check it out. And I am kicking off with one of the movies in that set, number 13, The Monster of the Opera. This movie's from the 1960s, 1964. It's a black and white Italian Gothic horror film. A little bit of a Phantom of the Opera riff, but the Phantom happens to be a vampire in this one. It's a little bit slow, a little bit boring, and kind of annoying, actually, because it's about very over-the-top, ridiculous theater people who are the main characters. They're kind of grating on the nerves. And it's interesting watching this movie how little it cares about the rules of subgenres. Because like the vampire, he's trying to kill people with a pitchfork. He turns people into skeleton with his mind. There's not a lot of rules to this thing. It's just not a great movie, unfortunately. Not the worst time ever. Not the worst movie to bottom out a list. But not really for me. At number 12, just over number 11, honestly. And that is The Seventh Grave. Also in Severin's Gothic set. This one's from 1965. It is a creepy little black and white Italian chiller. It's a little bit of a Cat and the Canary riff where a bunch of people have to come to a giant mansion for the reading of the will of a rich person who just died. It's a little spooky. There's a seance scene. There's people creeping around dark Gothic hallways with candlesticks. Not sure if there's ghosts or anything like that, like this girl right here. It looks from the cover like it's a vampire movie. Could not be further from the truth, so don't expect that. Super low key, not bad, but certainly not great either. At number 11 is John Carpenter's Dark Star. This was my second time watching the movie, but the first time on Blu-ray. I watched this because I'm kicking off a John Carpenter podcast series over on the Cobwebs podcast, where I'm talking about every John Carpenter movie, film by film, and pairing each one with a classic film that influenced it. The first episode is Dark Star, paired with 2001: A Space Odyssey. I talked to Keith Rich about that. You might have seen him on Brian Sauer's Just the Discs podcast. If you watch that, he's been a guest on there. And that's actually going to be coming out on Tuesday. But anyway, I watched this movie. I really didn't like it the first time I saw it. I watched it on Tubi. It looked really bad. I wasn't giving it my full attention because it was like during the day and the sun's coming in and I was kind of taking care of my baby and didn't really give it its due. I gave it its due this time. It's John Carpenter's first film. It started out as a student film, but then he went out and hustled, raised some more money for it, and ended up making it into a full feature film that got a theatrical release. And it's a science fiction film that's kind of a comedy. It's only funny a little bit. There is an alien that they made out of a beach ball and creature from the Black Lagoon hands as its feet. It's very weird. I kind of enjoyed it this time, particularly because there's a documentary included on this Blu-ray called Let There Be Light, The Odyssey of Dark Star. And it's like a 2-hour documentary on the making of this film. It's very interesting, more interesting than the film itself, but it did raise my esteem's not the right word. It raised my appreciation for this film. So I do recommend this Blu-ray to see this film in the best quality it can possibly be seen, and for that documentary. All right, kicking off the top 10 is Who's Harry Crumb? This is a 1980s comedy starring John Candy. And I watched this because, okay, it's one of these retro VHS slipcover editions. You might remember when Mill Creek was making these. They might still be making them. I'm not 100% sure. And I was reminded of this run of Blu-ray's existence recently. And I thought, I have a bunch of these and haven't watched them. Like, they were released super cheap from Mill Creek. And I bought them fairly frequently and then just kind of forgot about them on my shelf. So I thought I want to dedicate some time to actually watch through these movies. This was the one that I watched last month. A John Candy detective comedy. It almost feels a little bit like a spoof of The Big Sleep, something like that, where he is a private detective from a long line of great private detectives, but he's the one who didn't quite get that great detection gene. And he's a little bit the black sheep of the family, but he's really trying. And Jeffrey Jones is in this movie. And it tells you right from the start that he's the bad guy. There's no mystery for the audience here. But he hires John Candy to solve this crime because he knows John Candy will never solve it and he'll never get caught in this kidnapping scheme in order to make a lot of money. It's kind of funny. It's kind of enjoyable. I enjoyed it. It's the kind of movie that would never be made today. It would probably only be like the pilot of a TV show you would have to dedicate like 20 hours of your time to. But here you only have to dedicate 90 minutes to it. And it's silly, goofy. It's besides Jeffrey Jones and John Candy, it's also got Annie Potts, who was the receptionist in Ghostbusters. She's really fun to see. And it's got Shawnee Smith, who was the leading lady in Chuck Russell's The Blob remake. So I really enjoyed seeing her. I thought her and John Candy had great, buddy chemistry. Not romantic chemistry in this film, but just a couple of buddies trying to solve a crime. And it's a good time. So I'm hoping to check out more of these retro VHS Blu-rays soon. So you might see those in the June wrap-up next month. At number 9 is a Western that Kino Lorber put out. That is Canyon Passage. This movie is from 1946, starring Dana Andrews, Brian Donlevy, and Susan Hayward. Brian Donlevy is interesting because I started out just thinking he was like the most boring actor alive. And now every time he pops up in a movie, I'm always happy to see him. And I was happy to see him in this movie. This is a Western that doesn't have a very clear plot to it. A lot of Westerns are tight, compact thrillers, and that's not really what this is. A little bit of a character study, a little bit of just kind of seeing these people go through life. It's a frontier set Western, which I really enjoyed. A lot of Westerns are just sort of traveling out into the great unknown, or they're taking place in a town. This is people living in a just recently built village in the frontier, just trying to make a go at life out into this new land for them. And I mostly enjoyed the movie. It's not a nail biter. It's not super exciting, but it's a pretty good time. It's color. Dana Andrews is incredibly charming in it. I cared about his relationship with Susan Hayward. They're a little bit of a will they, won't they kind of situation. And I enjoyed them together. Really like Brian Donlevy in this. He's probably the most interesting part as this man who's probably a good man at heart, but a gambling addict and just can't quite get himself together. And Dana Andrews trying to be his friend, but trying to stop him from destroying himself. Kind of interesting. This movie is actually directed by Jacques Tourneur, who's directed like Cat People and Out of the Past. So it's a good Western. I watched this on the recommendation of a friend of mine, and I'm definitely glad I did. All right, I flip-flopped a little bit on 7 and 8. So maybe this is the wrong order in terms of quality, but I think it's the right order in terms of my enjoyment level. So at number 8 is Rad. This is a 1980s teen movie that you might remember made a big splash in the Blu-ray collectors community when Vinegar Syndrome put it out on 4K Blu-ray. Apparently this movie had not seen the light of day since the VHS era. A lot of people are really nostalgic about this movie from their childhood, so it was a huge deal when Vinegar Syndrome put it out. And I didn't pick it up. I'd never seen it. It didn't look like something I wanted to spend that much money on, so I let that lie. But I did pick it up on Mill Creek Blu-ray because after the Vinegar Syndrome 4K sold out, Vinegar Syndrome lost that license, didn't decide to print anymore like they usually do. Mill Creek picked it up and they put out this Blu-ray, which is pretty solid. It's not 4K, but it looks good. It's got a variety of special features on it, which isn't always the case with Mill Creek, so I was happy to see that. And I got it for like $11, $12, so I felt like that was the right price for this movie. I enjoyed this film. It is a classic underdog story about BMX racing. This kid, he loves riding his bike. He's really good at it, and he tries to enter this race. And it's kind of a typical snobs versus slobs kind of situation where he's just this underdog kid who doesn't come from money. money, and then the rich guys with their fancy bikes, they're like trying to push him out, and there's this evil businessman who's trying to push him out too because he stands to make a lot of money if his boy wins the race. The main guy's got a love interest played by Lori Loughlin, and I'm just kind of realizing recently Lori Loughlin made really good choices in the 1980s. I'm not a Full House guy. I know she has some weird personal stuff these days, but I don't quite know what's going on with that. But I really like her movies in the 1980s. She made a lot of good stuff. And this is kind of one of them. I thought it was really enjoyable, mostly for the soundtrack. The soundtrack is peak. It is absolute top notch. I've been listening to it on Spotify recently. Absolutely loving it. There's a particular race that's set to a song called Thunder in Your Heart. The race itself is fine, but I got really into it and really invested because that song is like the most cinematic song I've ever heard. It is so good. So I really love the soundtrack, and that kind of made the movie for me, along with Lori Loughlin. She was just really good in the 80s. Okay, number 7. Like I said, probably wrong order in terms of quality, but the right order for my enjoyment. That is Vinegar Syndrome's release of The Fear. I don't quite know why I blind bought this movie. I blind bought this from Vinegar Syndrome a long time ago. And just kind of on a whim because it was a 90s horror movie. I kind of like 90s horror. And I heard Wes Craven had an acting part in this film. And I thought, I don't know, it just sounds kind of interesting. I bought it. Pretty much as soon as I got it, I was kind of like, why did I buy this? And there was even times I considered reselling it. Like, I'm not going to watch this. But I got really hyped up for the Vinegar Syndrome sale that just happened last month. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna watch this Blu-ray that I bought and never checked out. And you know what? I really enjoyed myself. The Fear is a 1995 horror movie about a college student, a psychology student who decides to do a study over spring break out in the woods at a cabin his family owns. And he invites his close friends and his girlfriend to be the test patients in his psychology study, in which he studies fear, and he kind of interviews them about their darkest fears and their darkest secrets in front of everybody. It's an unbelievably horrible idea. Like, don't do this with your friends and your girlfriend. Do this with strangers, with volunteers for a study. Like, the whole thing is just completely insane. There ends up being a lot of personal drama between all the people there. There's like 5 love triangles. I tried to count them. I might even be short some. Some of the love triangles are insane. One of the weirdest things about this movie is it takes place at spring break, and his uncle shows up at the cabin at one point wearing a Santa suit, and he's like, oh yeah, my uncle runs the Christmas Village here in town. And I'm like, Christmas Village? And then at one point they go to the Christmas Village. It's a Christmas themed theme park, but like really low rent theme park. I'm like, what is all this? And then his uncle keeps talking about this evil Santa named Black Peter. And ultimately what the horror is this wooden man. There's this wooden man in the house who's just, made of wood, but maybe he's alive and maybe he comes alive and kills people. And I think part of the mythology is based around this evil Santa, Black Peter. I'm not even sure. The movie is insanely overstuffed. I could not believe my eyes. And that's the kind of Vinegar Syndrome movie I want. Like, some Vinegar Syndrome movies, they're slow, they're boring, there's just not a lot going on. This movie has way too much going on, and that was kind of okay with me. I enjoyed the insanity of this movie. It's a crazy movie. And right after I finished it, I put on a making of special feature. But I was like, where did this movie come from? Well, what do people think about it? And the writer's saying, yeah, I was hired to write a movie about a wooden doll who comes to life. And I'm like, that was the idea, and this is what they came up with. Like, there's so much unnecessary stuff in here. The mythology is so convoluted. Every time a character gets killed, it feels like the movie has switched subgenres. It's not just like a doll stabbing people. Like, there's so much going on. Crazy movie. I really enjoyed myself. I did. This is the kind of Vinegar Syndrome movie that I want, and I'm excited to get my sale order and talk to you guys about that soon. Next up, another movie in SEVERIN'S DANZA MACABRA set. That is Lady Frankenstein, a really good Hammer horror riff. It starts out kind of boring for about the first 40 minutes while it's just kind of copying Hammer horror with Joseph Cotten as a way less interesting Victor Frankenstein than Peter Cushing. But then about 40 minutes in, the monster comes to life, he does something, and the movie dramatically changes into something something very different and very interesting. It's a beautiful looking, just European gothic horror film that I really enjoyed, with some pretty campy special effects. And I'm a big fan of campy horror special effects. And it's just got some really sick stuff in there, some really cool stuff in there. I enjoyed myself. Before I go into the top 5, I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video. If you're enjoying it, please dust off that like button. Give this video a like because it really does help the channel. It's not just an ego boost for me, I swear. Helps out the channel. And if you want to see more videos from me talking about old movies, dust off that subscribe button as well. Breaking into the top 5 is the Criterion Blu-ray of History is Made at Night. This is from 1937. Kind of a romantic drama. I heard about this movie from a guest on the Cobwebs podcast. We did an episode where we were kind of fantasy programming a marathon of classic films, and this was one that my guest programmed. And I really like this movie. I'm glad that I picked it up and watched it. Starring Charles Boyer and Jean Arthur, two fantastic classic film stars. Jean Arthur is married to Colin Clive. Yes, Dr. Frankenstein from the Universal Frankenstein films. Love seeing him in this movie. He's rich, but he's kind of a terrible person. Like, it's not just that he's kind of a jerk. It almost feels like he stepped out of like a Universal horror film and he is her husband. Horrible guy. He's horribly jealous. Even though she's not cheating on him, he's always convinced she is. And his jealousy kind of drives her away and straight into the arms of Charles Boyer, who she meets, falls in love with. They have this instant connection. This is the most charming Charles Boyer performance I've ever seen, and that is saying something because that's a charming dude. I really cared about their romance. I thought it was pretty beautiful, but Colin Clive is demented in this movie, so it really adds some intensity to it. It kind of switches subgenres a lot. It's a romance movie, it's a drama, sometimes it's a little bit of a comedy, and it becomes like a disaster epic by the end. Like, it gets big. It turns into a way bigger movie, bigger story than I was expecting by the end. I was really impressed. There's some special effects that come into play. It's a cool movie. It's a special little thing that not a lot of people talk about, and I think they should, if anything for the cast, but also just for all the interesting stuff going on. Big fan of History is Made at Night. I think everybody should check it out. And my number 4, is this movie better than History is Made at Night? I'm kind of second guessing myself. I'm probably wrong, but I don't know. I really like this movie. It's Scream of the Demon Lover, the last movie from SEVERIN'S Gothic horror set. And this movie is like, it says on the back that it's Jane Eyre meets the Wolfman meets Frankenstein. It kind of is that. It's really cool. It's about a woman who comes to work as a biochemist for a baron who lives in a giant castle, and he's all dark and brooding and handsome. You kind of know, the deal of this movie. And they have this kind of demented romance. He's doing some weird experiments. There's this creepy guy just lingering around the house. You know who he is, what he's doing. There's some mystery to it. It's just got a lot of really cool horror stuff, a messed up romance that I thought was really interesting. I really like the actors. I love the look of it. It's beautiful. I'm a huge fan of this movie, and it's the main reason I'm super happy that I got that Severin Gothic horror set. My number 3 is such a pleasant surprise. I'm so happy I bought this movie, so happy I watched it. This is Shakedown. This is a film noir from 1950. Kino Lorber put out this Blu-ray, black and white noir film, starring a guy that I wasn't really familiar with, Howard Duff. Although every time I say I'm not familiar with a certain classic film actor, people get mad at me in the comments. So I'm sorry. I'm learning. I'm young. I'm learning. It's also got Brian Donlevy. Again, love Brian Donlevy. It's got Peggy Dow, Lawrence Tierney. Great cast. It's about this guy played by Howard Duff. He's a very charming, very talented guy who doesn't have a job, but he wants to work as a photographer. He kind of weasels his way into working for a newspaper as a photographer. And he does a really good job because he's kind of good at manipulating people, good at getting what he wants. And he's able to get good pictures because of that. And the receptionist there, played by Peggy Dow, kind of falls in love with him, and he falls for her kind of until she doesn't suit his purposes anymore. It's a classic rise and fall story of a guy who is talented and can move up in the world, but can't move up fast enough without turning to crime. And it's about his just pretty demented fall of doing worse and worse things, getting more and more involved with bad people to make money fast, to gain prestige as quick as he can. It's a really intense, great story. And I don't say this lightly. I feel like this is one of the great film noirs, and I never hear it talked about as such. It's a movie I only heard about because, again, my friend Keith Rich, who I'm doing the John Carpenter podcast with, he told me about it, and it is fantastic. It is so intense. The characters are so interesting. I would compare it a little bit to Nightcrawler with Jake Gyllenhaal in terms of a newspaper photographer who's just falling into deeper depravity in order to get the pictures that he wants. Except he's a little bit less like disgusting and weaselly in this movie. He's a little more socially acceptable. It's a great movie. Also, just loved Brian Donlevy in this movie. Fantastic. So excited about my top two, neither of which were first-time watches for me, but first-time watches of the Blu-rays. And this is Scream Factory's recent 4K of Return of the Living Dead. This is a 1985 zombie movie, actually directed by Dan O'Bannon, who wrote Dark Star and wrote Alien, and did a fantastic job with this movie. I've seen this movie many times. I even got to see it in the theater once, and Linnea Quigley was in attendance, and I got to meet her. Here's a picture of me and my friends and Linnea Quigley. This is the Scream Factory Blu-ray that I just got. And the transfer was absolutely stunning. I never got Scream Factory's regular Blu-ray of this. I only had a really basic Blu-ray that I got at Dollar General. I should have brought it with me, but I didn't. The 4K is revolutionary. I thought it looked absolutely amazing. I feel like this is one of the best, most impressive 4Ks I've seen. The most impressive 4K that I personally ever seen so far is still Casablanca, but this is up there, like 2 or 3. I thought it was amazing. It's absolutely jam-packed with special features. And some people are complaining about this. I'm kind of glad that Scream Factory is not doing original cover art for their 4Ks, because you cannot beat this. I have seen the cover art, their original cover art for their regular Blu-ray. I don't like it. This is the original poster art. It looks amazing. This cannot be beat. So I love this movie. It has amazing practical effects. This is the kind of zombie movie I want, in that the zombies are not just actors walking around with pale makeup just going, ugh. This uses puppetry. It uses animatronics. The tar man looks incredible. This one female zombie who's missing her legs, that's on the table in that one scene. It's an amazing animatronic. Looks incredible on 4K. It's such an innovative zombie movie in terms of the special effects. And it's funny, it's light, but it's not afraid to get really dark by the end. So I love Return of the Living Dead. If you're a fan of this movie, I think you gotta get the 4K. I think it's really worth it. At number 1, I did not just watch Return of the Living Dead last month. I also watched Return of the Living Dead 3. Now, I had seen this movie once before, I'm pretty sure on streaming, and I believe I heard it was a cut version, because an uncut version was released on this Vestron Blu-ray. This was released years ago, and I've had it for years, and I never rewatched it. Saw it once on streaming, bought the Blu-ray, never popped it in until this time. And the special effects in this movie blew my mind. The gore effects are astounding. They're so extravagant, over the top, so beautifully done. The zombies are just as cool in this movie as in Return of the Living Dead. Again, amazing animatronics, amazing puppetry, truly incredible stuff. But I like this movie better than Return of the Living Dead because it's not just a fun zombie movie. It's a lot darker, it's a lot more intense, and it has a really emotional story. It's centered around a teen romance. This young couple who's very much in love, and they're very rebellious, and they're trying to get away from their oppressive parents, at least his oppressive dad. And in a freak motorcycle accident, she is killed. And he knows that his dad works with crazy zombie stuff for the military. And he injects her, or he lets her breathe in the gas that turns people into zombies in this franchise. She becomes a zombie, but that's the interesting thing about this franchise is people don't just instantly become mindless zombies. They kind of have their faculties for a while, but their body is dying. They can feel the pain of their... Anyway, I don't want to get too graphic, but she basically puts a lot of weird stuff in her skin in order to kind of get the pain to go away so she won't have to eat people's brains. Yes, this is getting gross. This is getting dark. It's a really dark movie. I love this movie. I think it is emotional, beautiful, romantic, intense, disgusting. It's kind of the full package of a horror film. It's from 1993, and I gotta say, it's my favorite Return of the Living Dead film, and I'm so glad Vestron put it out. They did an amazing job, and I love it. It's my number 1 of the past month. So that's it, everybody. All the Blu-rays that I watched over the past month, ranked from worst to best, or from least favorite to favorite. You know what? I'm not going to redo that. This is real. This is what life is, guys. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Dust off the like button, subscribe button if you enjoyed it. Let me know down in the comments, what do you think of these movies? And what were your favorite movies that you watched over the past month, or your favorite Blu-rays? I actually considered before doing this video, should I add streaming movies to these rankings, these end of month videos? And I decided not, because I like that the list is a little bit more limited, and because I can spend a little bit more time talking about each movie without these videos being crazy long. And there's something special about it being movies that I chose to put my money towards to buy and then to watch. Like there's a little more investment in there. So I feel like the list is a little bit more special. So that's how I choose to do these. I hope you enjoy them. I've been consistently amazed by how much support you guys are giving to these videos. I didn't think anybody would be interested. It was just kind of an idea I did last December. And from last December all the way now through May, we've been consistently doing them every month. So I have no plans to stop. I love doing these videos. I look forward to them every month. Hope you do too. Thank you so much for watching. With all that said, go have some fun. I'll see you later.